Myth 1. Picking up a crying baby produces spoiled, demanding children. This belief was codified in 1928 by behavioral psychologist John B. Watson in Psychological Care of Infant and Child, which sold 100,000 copies within months of publication. Watson applied stimulus response conditioning to infant care, instructing parents never hug and kiss them, never let them sit in your lap. If you must, kiss them once on the forehead when they say goodnight. For 2 decades, this framing dominated pediatric guidance in the United States. In reality, the clinical evidence runs in the opposite direction. In 1972, developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth at Johns Hopkins University, together with researcher Sylvia Bell, published a controlled study in developmental psychology tracking caregiver responsiveness across the first year of life. Infants whose caregivers responded promptly and consistently to crying cried less by the end of the first year, not more. The mechanism is neurological. Each time a caregiver calms a distressed infant, the developing nervous system practices transitioning from activation to regulation. Repeated across thousands of interactions, this process builds the scaffolding for emotional self-regulation in later childhood and adulthood. The American Academy of Pediatrics explicitly states that parents cannot spoil an infant under 6 months of age. Watson's parenting prescriptions were based on 0 controlled trials with human infants. His book promoted as scientific certainty a claim he never tested. Myth 2. Bouncing an infant or allowing early weight-bearing on the legs produces permanent bow-leggedness. This belief spread through 20th century grandparent networks globally. Newborn examiners, traditional birth attendants, and family members across numerous cultures observed the bowed appearance of newborn legs at birth and attributed the alignment to premature weight-bearing or rough handling. In reality, a newborn's bowed leg alignment is a normal feature of neonatal anatomy. The legs are folded and crossed inside the uterus for months before birth. This produces a natural varus alignment that resolves without any intervention, typically by 24 months of age. The American Academy of Pediatrics documents this as standard developmental anatomy. Early supported weight-bearing activates anti-gravity musculature and supports motor development rather than impeding it. The bowing reflects the geometry of the womb. Handling does not produce it and cannot meaningfully alter its resolution. Myth 3. Introducing peanuts, eggs, and fish before age 2 or 3 increases the risk of food allergy in children. This was not a folk myth. In 2000, the American Academy of Pediatrics published a clinical report recommending that parents at elevated allergy risk delay peanut introduction until age 3, eggs until age 2, and fish until age 2. Pediatricians across the United States and the United Kingdom adopted this as standard practice. Parents following professional medical advice actively avoided these foods during infancy for nearly a decade. In reality, the guideline increased food allergy rates. The reversal began with an observation by Professor Gideon Lack, a pediatric allergist at King's College London. Lack noticed that Jewish children in the United Kingdom had peanut allergy rates approximately 10 times higher than Jewish children in Israel. The dietary difference was direct. Israeli infants routinely consumed bamba, a peanut-flavored puffed corn snack, from their first year of life. British infants avoided peanuts, per official guidance. Lack designed the Learning Early About Peanut Allergy trial, known as the LEAP study, enrolling 640 British infants aged 4 to 11 months at high risk for peanut allergy. Results published in the New England Journal of Medicine in February 2015 were definitive. 17.2% of children in the peanut avoidance group developed peanut allergy by age 5. Among children who received early peanut exposure, 3.2% developed allergy, an 81% relative risk reduction. The American Academy of Pediatrics reversed its guidance in 2008. The FDA issued updated recommendations in 2023 encouraging peanut introduction between 4 and 6 months. The clinical protocol designed to prevent food allergy contributed, per the LEAP investigators, to a significant proportion of the peanut allergy epidemic that doubled in prevalence in the United States between 1997 and 2008. Myth 4. Fever in infants is a normal symptom of teething. Hippocrates documented this association in 400 BC, attributing infant fever, convulsions, and diarrhea to erupting teeth. The belief survived for over 2,000 years across medical systems on multiple continents. In reality, teething does not produce fever. A 2016 meta-analysis published in Pediatrics reviewed 16 studies spanning 45 years of clinical observation. Teething is associated with gum irritation, drooling, and mild irritability. It is not associated with fever. Clinical fever is defined as a core temperature at or above 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Teething may produce a marginal temperature elevation below this threshold, attributed to increased blood flow to inflamed gum tissue. A temperature at or above 100.4 degrees in a teething infant indicates a separate active infection requiring evaluation. Attributing a real fever to teething delays identification and treatment of the actual cause. When Lucy Jefferson, sixth child of President Thomas Jefferson, died in 1784 at age 2.5, the attending physician attributed the death to the complicated evils of teething, worms, and whooping cough. The teething attribution almost certainly obscuring the primary infectious cause. Myth 5. Applying honey to a pacifier soothes teething pain in infants. This practice appears in European and Middle Eastern folk medicine records from at least the 17th century. Honey's documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties established its reputation as a versatile infant remedy. The practice persisted through the 20th century, transmitted through grandparent networks beyond the reach of formal pediatric guidance. In reality, honey poses a specific and serious medical threat to any infant under 12 months of age. Clostridium botulinum spores exist naturally in soil, dust, and air, and are present in commercially sold honey samples across all regions, including the United States. In adults and children over 1 year, the spores pass through the digestive system without harm. In infants, the gut is insufficiently acidic and the microbiome insufficiently developed to prevent germination. Once the spores germinate inside the infant's intestines, the bacteria produce botulinum toxin, a neurotoxin that blocks acetylcholine release at neuromuscular junctions, causing progressive muscle paralysis. Clinical progression begins with constipation and weakened feeding, advances to loss of head control and an abnormally weak cry, and in severe cases produces respiratory failure requiring mechanical ventilation. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention documents that infant botulism accounts for 60 to 70% of all botulism cases reported annually in the United States. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises no honey in any form before 12 months, including honey present in baked goods. Botulinum spores survive standard cooking and baking temperatures. Baked goods containing honey are not safe for infants under 12 months. Myth 6. A sleeping baby should never be woken. The maxim circulated in Anglo-American child-rearing literature through the 19th and 20th centuries without any age qualification. By 1946, Dr. Benjamin Spock's Baby and Child Care, which sold over 50 million copies across its various editions, promoted responsive, flexible infant scheduling, a framework that entered popular culture as the unconditional instruction, never wake a sleeping baby. In reality, the rule reverses in the first weeks of life. A newborn stomach holds approximately 5 to 7 milliliters at birth and digests breast milk and formula rapidly. Sustaining weight gain and neurological development requires 8 to 12 feedings per 24-hour period. The Mayo Clinic, Nemours Kids Health, and the American Academy of Pediatrics each specify that newborns who sleep longer stretches should be wakened to feed until birth weight has been recovered, typically within the first 2 weeks of life. Never wake a sleeping baby is accurate guidance for toddlers. Applied without qualification to newborns, it is a medically dangerous instruction. Myth 7. Purpose-built educational toys accelerate cognitive development in infants. The educational toy market in the United States generates over $8 billion annually. From the 1990s onward, products marketed as developmental tools, stacking toys, light-up panels, musical mobiles, and bilingual audio devices, drew selectively on genuine neuroscience identifying early childhood as a sensitive period for brain development. The commercial inference from stimulation shapes the brain to this specific object delivers it was not supported by controlled research. In reality, the primary mechanism driving early cognitive and language development is caregiver interaction, not object properties. Professor Patricia Kuhl at the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences documented this across more than 3 decades of research. A 2020 study she co-authored with Naja Ferjan Ramirez and Sarah Roseberry Lytle, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that parents coached to use parentese, the slow, high-pitched, exaggerated speech caregivers instinctively adopt with infants, produced children who used real words at twice the frequency of control group children by 18 months, averaging approximately 100 words against 60. A 2007 study by Frederick Zimmerman, Dmitry Christakis, and Andrew Meltzoff at the University of Washington, published in the Journal of Pediatrics, found that for every hour per day infants aged 6 to 16 months watched educational DVDs, specifically the Baby Einstein series, they understood an average of 6 to 8 fewer words than infants who did not. Walt Disney Company, which owned the Baby Einstein brand, offered full refunds on all Baby Einstein DVDs in September 2009 after being threatened with a class action lawsuit. Myth 8. Infants require supplemental water in hot weather to prevent dehydration. Prior to 1991, several international health organizations, including WHO regional guidance distributed in tropical and equatorial regions, recommended water supplementation for infants in hot conditions. The Baby-Friendly Hospital Initiative, launched jointly by the WHO and UNICEF in 1991, formally revised these recommendations, establishing exclusive breastfeeding as the standard for the first 6 months of life. In reality, breast milk is approximately 87% water by composition, and formula is similarly water-based. Both supply all the fluid a healthy newborn requires. A newborn's kidneys in the first months of life operate at roughly 1/6 the filtration capacity of a healthy adult kidney. When an infant receives water, the immature kidneys cannot process. The excess dilutes sodium in the bloodstream, producing hyponatremia, a condition whose symptoms include lethargy, irritability, seizures, and in severe cases, coma. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises no water for any infant under 6 months, regardless of temperature or season. After 6 months, the AAP and CDC recommend 4 to 8 ounces of water daily alongside regular feedings. In hot conditions, a breastfeeding infant automatically receives more foremilk, the thin, high-water initial component of each feeding, increasing fluid delivery without any supplemental water. Myth 9. Baby walkers support and accelerate the development of independent walking in infants. Wheeled walkers have been commercially sold in the United States since the 1960s, with product naming and packaging explicitly positioning them as developmental mobility tools. No controlled evidence supported the developmental claim before or after commercialization. In reality, walkers delay independent walking. Research has consistently shown that infants who use walkers achieve unsupported walking later than those who do not, because the device distributes body weight in a way that bypasses the core musculature and lower limb strength required for independent ambulation. The American Academy of Pediatrics has called for a complete ban on the manufacture and sale of wheeled baby walkers since 2004. Canada banned their production, sale, and advertisement in 2004 under the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act. A 2018 study in pediatrics by Sims and colleagues documented that between 1990 and 2014, approximately 231,000 children under 15 months were treated in United States emergency rooms for walker-related injuries, predominantly head and neck injuries from staircase falls. A child in a wheeled walker travels more than 3 feet per second. The device, named for the developmental milestone it was marketed to accelerate, is clinically associated with delayed acquisition of that milestone. Myth 10. Lullabies reliably induce sleep in infants. Lullabies appear in every documented human culture and predate written history. 19th and 20th century child-rearing literature treated their sleep-inducing effect as self-evident and universal. In reality, lullabies and soothing music are established calming stimuli. They reduce cortisol levels and lower heart rate in infants, creating a physiological state conducive to sleep. However, no controlled research documents lullabies as reliably producing sleep onset. Music reduces arousal. It does not override the neurological conditions required for sleep initiation. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine identifies a consistent, age-appropriate bedtime routine as the evidence-based mechanism for sleep consolidation, of which music may be one component. The calming effect of a lullaby is real. The reliably sleep-inducing effect is not. Myth 11. Exposing infants to classical music permanently raises their intelligence. The origin of this myth is traceable to a single 1993 study by psychologist Francis Rauscher at the University of California, Irvine, published in Nature. The study involved 36 college students, not infants. After 10 minutes of Mozart's sonata for 2 pianos in D major, participants scored slightly higher on one spatial reasoning task. The effect lasted approximately 15 minutes. The study made no claims about infants, long-term intelligence, or IQ. Media coverage stripped these qualifications entirely and reformulated the finding as a prescription for producing smarter babies through passive music exposure. In reality, a 1999 meta-analysis by psychologist Christopher Chabris at Harvard Graduate School of Education, covering 16 replication studies and published in Nature, found the effect was approximately 1.5 IQ points, confined to a single paper-folding spatial task and attributable to generalized mood improvement rather than any property specific to Mozart. The same performance boost appeared when participants listened to Yanni. In 1998, Georgia Governor Zell Miller cited the Mozart effect as justification for a state budget proposal to distribute a classical music CD to every newborn in Georgia at birth. Myth 12. Infants who cannot sleep through the night by 3 months have a developmental problem, or their parents are doing something wrong. This expectation became embedded in Western parenting culture through mid-20th century pediatric guidance that conflated the developmental ideal with the developmental norm. By the 1980s and 1990s, 3 months had become the informal standard against which parents measured nighttime sleep consolidation. In reality, 3 months is too early for consolidated sleep in most infants. Dr. Jody Mindell, Associate Director of the Sleep Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, documents that the typical window for acquiring the neurological capacity to sustain a 6 to 8 hour overnight stretch without feeding is between 4 and 6 months. Before 3 months, melatonin secretion has not yet begun, and the circadian system has not yet consolidated. A 2012 study in sleep medicine found that approximately 57% of infants achieve a 5-hour stretch by 3 months. More than 40% do not. Both are documented as clinically normal. The 3-month expectation has been directly linked by pediatric researchers to premature introduction of solid foods, parents attempting to extend overnight sleep before the infant's digestive system is ready, which before 4 months is associated with increased obesity risk and allergic sensitization. Myth 13. Restricting or eliminating daytime naps forces infants to sleep longer and more consistently at night. This reasoning appeared in scheduling-based childcare literature that became popular in the United Kingdom and the United States in the 1980s and 90s, including structured routine programs that recommended extended wakefulness windows specifically to maximize overnight sleep pressure. In reality, the opposite is documented. Pediatric sleep researcher Dr. Monique LeBourgeois at the University of Colorado studied the physiological effects of nap deprivation in young children. Research from her laboratory, published in Current Biology, found that nap-deprived toddlers showed elevated cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, and significantly reduced capacity to regulate negative emotions compared to napped peers. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends daytime naps until age 3. An overtired infant produces elevated cortisol, which is biochemically stimulating and actively disrupts nighttime sleep onset and maintenance. Withholding daytime naps does not build sleep pressure that resolves smoothly overnight. It produces a hormonally stressed neurological state that resists sleep consolidation. Myth 14. An infant who cries excessively has an underlying medical condition that requires diagnosis. In the first half of the 20th century, pediatric training texts framed prolonged infant crying as a pathological symptom requiring clinical investigation. This framework spread into parenting culture through the second half of the century, reinforced by the expansion of diagnostic medicine and the expectation that unexplained infant distress must have a treatable cause. In reality, a developmental crying peak in the first weeks of life is neurological, not pathological. Pediatrician Morris Wessel at Yale University defined colic in 1954 as crying for at least 3 hours per day on at least 3 days per week for at least 3 weeks. By this definition, colic affects between 10 and 40% of infants worldwide, across all feeding methods and care environments. Developmental pediatrician Dr. Ronald Barr at the University of British Columbia tracked infant crying patterns across human populations, including San hunter-gatherer communities in Botswana and urban Western cohorts, and found an identical developmental crying curve in every population studied, regardless of culture, feeding practice, or infant care customs. The crying peak at approximately 6 weeks of age appears in every human infant on the same biological schedule. It is a phase of neurological maturation, not a symptom of illness. Myth 15. Infants who walk or speak earlier than average are more intelligent than those who do not. This interpretation entered mainstream parenting culture through 20th century developmental milestone charts, designed originally as clinical screening tools for developmental delay. The charts were built to detect the bottom of the normal distribution. Parents and popular media repurposed them as intelligence rankings, treating performance within the normal range as a competitive metric. In reality, early walking and early talking measure largely unrelated developmental systems. Walking is governed by musculoskeletal readiness, cerebellar motor circuit maturation, and individual temperament. The CDC documents the normal range for independent walking as 9 to 15 months. Neither extreme within that range predicts IQ. Early talking shows a stronger correlation with later language outcomes, but language development follows a non-linear trajectory. A child producing few words at 18 months may experience a vocabulary expansion between 20 and 24 months and match or surpass early talkers by the third birthday. Speech-language pathology research consistently documents this pattern. Albert Einstein reportedly did not begin speaking until age 3, confirmed by biographer Walter Isaacson in his 2007 biography, sourced from Einstein's own accounts and family correspondence. Einstein published the special theory of relativity at 26. Myth 16. A newborn's length at birth reliably predicts how tall that child will be as an adult. The measurement of birth length became standardized in hospital maternity wards after the 1950s, embedded in birth records alongside weight and APGAR scores. Growth charts introduced by the National Center for Health Statistics in the 1970s positioned birth measurements as the starting point for longitudinal physical tracking, encouraging parents to extrapolate adult stature from the earliest data point available. In reality, birth length is a poor predictor of adult height. The primary determinant of final stature is parental height. Pediatric endocrinologists use the mid-parental height formula, the average of both biological parents' heights adjusted by 2.5 inches for sex, as the most reliable predictor available. Puberty timing is the second major variable. Later puberty provides more years of prepubertal linear growth, and many children who are short in early childhood surpass peers who grew quickly in infancy. Birth length reflects the gestational environment. It does not encode the genetic height potential that will express itself across the following 18 years.